Hello and welcome back to another Demis Hellen tutorial. We're going to make a trance rolling bass classic preset, but using Sylenth1 in this instance. So it's a very simple setup to get a good sounding rolling trance bass. All we need is an oscillator and a filter to really get us off the ground and started with some really nice sounding warm preset design. In this tutorial, I'm going to be assuming that you have some knowledge of synthesis. If you don't, I do have a playlist which will be on screen now that you can go and visit and see other sound design tutorials, and there are plenty of other tutorials out there on YouTube to explain synthesis in detail. And for this demonstration, we are going to be using one oscillator out of the 4 that are available on part A, that's 2, and part B, that's another 2. We're going to use just one oscillator for this demo. And the reason for that is to keep it simplified for the tutorial so you can understand it, but then it gives you the option to add your own oscillator in there, so on top, and start blending some sounds together and create your own design. And jumping in, we're going to go to the menu, presets, and initialize here, clear and initialize. So now we've got an empty preset that sounds like this. That's the MIDI pattern that we're going to be using for this bass, and you can see everything is reset to 0 practically. And the first thing we're going to do is turn the volume down on oscillator 2 here on part A, so we have nothing. Part B, the volumes turned down just so we know that they are not there, and we just have part A. The first thing I'm going to do is widen it a touch. To start with, just 2 voices. I'm going to turn the stereo down so we're not getting too much stereo feedback moving when the phase is moving from left and right. I'm going to up the detune to about 9 o'clock just for now so we get some nice blending of the 2 voices. I'm going to turn retrig off so we get that analog approach. Okay, so you can see that I updated the detune there, just increased that level of detune, as well as just moving that stereo just a little bit just to get that balance. And now we have a solid foundation. I'm just going to drop this 1 octave so we don't have to drop the MIDI, and it just puts it into a position where I want to start designing this sound. Now we have the basics there of the oscillator, and we're not going to worry about too much about the amp envelope at this stage. We are now going to route this filter. So we're going to choose a filter type, and there's only 3 in Sylenth1, but we're going to choose the low pass, that's all we need. And we're going to listen to how this works. We're going to leave it on 24 dB per octave drop on the filter type, and we're going to use the mod envelope to start modulating the filter. And the first thing that we need to do is go to this menu here, and we need to choose cutoff A. If you was using both pages, you'd use A and B, but we're only using part A here. And I'm going to bring everything down to 0, and I'm just going to bump up just slightly the decay there, and that's where we're going to start with this. And I'm going to bump this up to 3 o'clock, so we are now introducing that much. That's the amount of how much we're going to introduce of this cutoff and how much this envelope is going to make this peak. So every time the sound is hit, this decay here will briefly come in, and then it'll shoot straight back down to 0 and turn off again because the decay rate is so fast and the sustain is non-existent. So it's just going to literally open the filter, close it back down really quickly. So you'll hear that now. There is a little bit of a click on the top, and that is the filter opening ever so slightly and ever so quickly. So let's increase that. Now you can hear that this is opening up the filter even more. So we're going to balance this out. I'm going to have that to about there. I'm going to open up the sustain just a little bit. Okay, so we've got that set up, and that is starting to open the filter. So let's go back to amp envelope A here, and I'm going to create something similar, but not as drastic on those settings there. And as you can hear, it's now starting to come together a little bit more. We're getting that regular And we're going to go up to the master envelope here, and we're going to create the same shape, but not as dramatic. So it's still open a little bit, and then we can tweak this at a later point. So if we close this down, you can hear it's doing the same thing. I want a little bit of length on the note for now. That all sounds good. Now we've got this set up, but we haven't really done anything with the controls here. So I'm going to put warm drive on because I just want that warm sort of really nice analog feel that Sylenth offers. Now we want to control the filter. So let's take this cut off and we'll drag this down till we start getting a little bit more of a cut off vibe to it. Okay, so too much. I wanted to get to the point where you can hear the tone of the note, not just the click, because if we go too low, you start to get something that sounds like it's not actually in the correct pitch. And you don't really get to hear that note in full, and it doesn't sound too great. So we just want to open it up so we've got a little bit of that coming through. I'm going to bring the drive up. Careful to watch the monitoring over here. That's sounding quite nice. I'm going to open up the key tracking. You can hear exactly what that's doing. It's like adding an extra envelope in here. Now we're going to open up the mod envelope and drag this down one more octave for now. Okay, starting to sound really nice now. So I've just brought the envelope down there, as you can see. And I just want to add in here, we're going to control the amp envelope now to bring down that level. So you can hear that note is a little bit sustained. It's got a little bit of length on it, whereas this is meant to be really closing it down. Let's just listen to how dropping the decay just tightens up that sound a little bit more. You can hear I've just dropped it probably 2 notches there, and we've now got this nice solid sound. Now, I want this to be a little bit wider, so I'm going to increase the voices to the maximum 8, and let's just see if we like the sound of it. I'm just tweaking the stereo here, so we're not restricting it too much. I like the sound of that. Yes, we do want basses to be more sort of down the middle, but the upper basses and things like that do tend to have more width, and there's nothing stopping you having a bit of extra voicing down in the lower octaves. As long as it's controlled right, everything is good. Okay, so now we are going to jump into adding some effects. Let's create some sound design. So this is one of the questions that I always get asked. Do you use the internal effects or do you use the external effects? I've done a video on this. I'll put that on screen now, going into why you would use internal versus external, or both, or neither. It's all depending on what you're trying to do at the end of that journey. We're going to use these as sound designs. So these are going to actually contribute to the feel and the sound of this. So not necessarily just putting reverb and delay to make them sound really good and mixed in really nice, because technically I don't really use the reverb or the delay that comes out of the synth unless it has a sound design purpose. And first we'll start with distortion. So we click on distortion here, and I'm going to put a bit crusher on here to start with. Let's just see what we can create here. I've changed this to decimate now. And I'm just listening to the sounds. Do I like the sound of it? I want a bit of grittiness in there, and that sounds quite nice around here somewhere. I'm just going to turn the dry wet down, so it's just introducing a little bit of that grittiness. And that's adding to the sound design, that's giving it a little bit of character. Yes, you're not going to hear that little bit of bit crushing, but it adds to that harmonic texture, and it's all about making sounds a little bit fuller and just a little bit more contributing to the sound. And yes, that's a little part of the sound, but every time you add a little bit on and you start putting that through some compression and distortion in your third-party apps, you'll start to bring out those details and you can control how it sounds. Okay, we're going to jump into the EQ next, and we're going to put some EQ on here. We're going to keep it on one pole, and we're going to alter these bass frequencies. All I want to do is just roll off those lower ends. I'm going to put it about 50 for now. That sounds quite nice. It's just rolled off that lower end, so it's not as heavy. And it's brought out a little bit of clarity as well, so that's a bonus. Now we're going to put a bit of delay on here. I'm going to turn off ping pong for now. I'm going to turn the dry wet down to about 10 o'clock. Now, what we want to do here is to create something interesting, and usually I'll go for some sort of dotted rhythm mixed with a straight rhythm. It's dependent on how you want it to sound, and we're going to roll some of the lows off as well. So let's start with that. I'll roll them off to about 50 Hz again. And the highs, I'm just going to roll off at about 10,000 for now. Okay, so if we hover over the delay left and right, you can see they're on quarter notes in this section here. And that's also on quarter notes. So let's drop that down to 1/8 dotteds. Now we're starting to get a bit of interesting stereo detail. I'm going to turn the width down, just so it's not panning too much back and forth, because I don't want it to be a full stereo spread. So that's starting to add a little bit of interesting detail on the top now. Let's increase that. And that sounds about right there. I'm just chopping off the highs so we get a nice delay that doesn't stand out on top of the bass. It's actually mixing in with the same frequencies that it's operating at. Because this is too bright. That's letting all of the frequencies pass through, and it's just taking up headroom where you need for your hats and everything else that's higher up in the mix. And I like it about there. Let's listen to that with a kick. Let's just see what that sounds like at the moment. Okay, so apart from the volume balancing, that's not too bad. Let's just turn this up so we get a little bit more of a better representation. All sounding pretty good. So let's just jump out of Sylenth for a second, and I'm just going to change this bass pattern here. As you can see, this is the pattern that we have. Feel free to use that. And what we're going to do here is copy these down for now. So we have this pattern. We're going to go for the classic rolling trance bass. You'll have seen me do this a million times over. It's the most simplest form of rolling trance bass that we can do. Oops. And I'm just going to hit J, and I'm going to drag them down so the notes are a little bit spaced and they're not touching each other for when the rolling starts. So let's drag that up an octave. And let's bring that volume down. So we're starting to get a very nice sound there. There's a few tweaks we need to do. There is the stereo panning issue. You can hear that there's a bit of phasing going on, and we can reverse things like this by reversing the phase and just changing how the detune and the voicing's working, just to balance them out to the point where everything seems to just fit quite nicely. And we can reduce the voices for a less intense feel, and we can even go down to 1 if we want. 0, 1 for a really, really simple bass, but you start to lose that detail. So 6 is sounding pretty good. 8 sounds a little bit too intense, but 6 sounds like it's in a good place. Now we can do our final tweaks, so we can look into how this cutoff is interacting with the sound. We can put a little bit of pitch shifting on there, and we'll demonstrate that now actually. We'll just notch up that decay just ever so slightly on mod envelope 2. and we'll go to pitch A. So it's controlling the pitch of oscillator A, or part A, shall we say. And I'll just put this up to full so you can hear it. So there's now a bit of a click attack on the front. If we turn this off, you'll be able to hear the difference. And what that's doing is pitch shifting ever so quickly because the decay is so ever so slightly open. It's hitting the sound, but it's decaying straight away to nothing. So it's just creating a gate essentially that turns the pitch up and then straight back down. And it's so fast that you can't even hear it happening. You just hear a click. If you increase the decay, you can hear that that pitch sliding starts to happen. And if we turn the decay up here and just hit one of these notes, you can hear that it pitch shifts. It's cut off at the moment. So you hear an obvious pitch shift, and the higher it goes, the longer it is. And what we're wanting is a fast pitch. So that is one way to add a little bit of extra clarity to the sound to make it sound like it's driving a little bit harder. And then obviously when you start doing third-party processing, you can really bring out these sounds. But what we're going to do is actually put cut off A again on here, and you'll be wondering why we do this, but if you put this through a second mod envelope, you have more control over how this filter is being modified. So let's have a listen to what's going on. So now we're getting the best of both worlds. We're actually modifying the filter from two different mod envelopes with two different shapes. So this one's quite sharp and gives you that initial nice, short, stabby, rolling bass effect. And then this one has the control to open up that filter a little bit more whilst retaining that setting on that one, but kind of essentially overlay another shape over the top. So you're getting the stabbiness from this one, and then you're getting the detail and the length from the second one, whilst keeping that filter closed. And if you turn it off, that's just cut off A on mod envelope 1. On mod envelope 2, if we turn that up, you can hear it's starting to add extra detail in there. And finally, with all preset design, let's just say that we've got everything that we wanted to do. There's so much to cover, and we're not going to cover it all. We're just going to kind of get you up and running, and then you can start dialing in your own settings, is the mod wheel. Hit the mod wheel, and then we're going to assign cutoff A to that mod wheel. I'm just going to turn it so it's about there. So then when we start modulating with the mod wheel, we've got the option of opening up the filter, and you can choose how much that opens up when the mod wheel is open, so have a mess around with that. And there we have it. We've created a bass preset in Sylenth1 just using one oscillator. Feel free to add others in there and share it away on the Demis Hellen chat Facebook forum. A lot of people are sharing stuff on there, and it's really handy and really nice to see all of this information coming out for people to use and put into their own projects. I hope you found this tutorial useful and that you can apply this into your own track. Like I said at the beginning, if you want this preset without having to follow this step by step, you can join my Patreon and you can download that free preset there. If not, you can always pause and play the video and just do it as we go along. So it just gives you the opportunity to get that preset should you need it. And finally, thank you very much for watching. I would encourage you to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you see all 3 videos per week on trance and music production topics. That includes reviews and how-tos and walkthroughs and things like that. There's all different types of video content that you can discover. I'd encourage you to click the link in the description. That also has a playlist that shows you some of the best and most watched videos on the channel. Hit the like button and drop a comment. I always get back to everybody on the comments as well. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.